Alright, welcome. My name is K. Michael Russell. I am a comic book colorist, and welcome to my YouTube channel. So if you've seen the headline, the title for this video, which I think is going to be why I sold my Wacom MobileStudio Pro for an iPad Pro, you're probably really scratching your head if you're familiar with my channel. This is a video that I never in a million years expected to make, and I have learned a lot that I didn't know just a few weeks ago. So I wanted to make a video to kind of explain what's going on, and I want to start by doing a little bit of background on how I use, or how I used, my Wacom MobileStudio Pro. And also I'm going to try to say Wacom every time, because last video that I mentioned it, I had several people tell me I was saying it wrong. It's not Wacom, I'm sorry. Old habit. Primarily, most of the time, when I'm coloring at home, when you guys see me coloring here, I'm working on a Wacom, this is an Intuos Pro, I think they call it. It's like a $200 tablet. It's just a regular graphic style tablet, because I have a big monitor, and I like my big monitor, and it's more comfortable for me. I've got some neck, upper back issues sometimes, probably from sitting at a desk all the time. It's just more comfortable because I can sit up straight, I can look straight ahead, and I can draw, and I'm really used to it because I've been doing it since 2003, I think. That's a long time, okay? So we're talking about 14 years ago. So I bought a Wacom MobileStudio Pro about 10 months ago, did a review on the channel. Overall liked it. It was a positive review. There were some things I didn't like, mostly having to do with all the accessories you had to buy with it. And it turns out that I'm just not using it as much as I thought I would. You know, I thought I would plop it down and it would be my primary tablet the vast majority of the time. It turns out that, you know, for me personally, you know, looking down at almost, you know, at any angle did not work out for my neck very well for any extended period of time, which you need when you're coloring for extended periods of time. And I was having a tough time finding a place that was comfortable. I was having a hard time finding an angle that was comfortable, because one of two things would happen. Either I set it down too low and I'm craning my neck, just because it's just, you're going to do that if it's down. No matter how hard you try, you can't like do this. It just doesn't work very well. Or I would think, okay, smart guy, I'm going to raise it up, right? So I had it on a swing arm. I raised it up higher, so I could sit up a little higher. It was more comfortable, but my arm is no longer now resting on anything, and shoulder problems. Okay, so I started having shoulder issues. So when I would use it, every now and then I'd get it out. I mostly used it when I was traveling, or just going to get out of the office and go somewhere, and I'd break it out. But it was really hard to find a place that I could really get comfortable in this thing for any extended period of time. So I ended up just not using it very much, which is kind of insane for a $2,400 device, and I realized that. And then something happened about 3 weeks ago. I'm in a Facebook group with a bunch of other pro colorists, and there's a colorist there named John Rauch. You've probably seen one of his comics. I looked him up earlier, and he's actually colored almost 700 issues, which is amazing. Because I think we're about the same age, but he started very young and got a big head start on me. I was kind of late to the game. But John is worked for everybody: DC, Marvel, Image, IDW. He's Batman, all the biggest possible books. So he knows this stuff, obviously. And he had posted some work, and he said he had done it on his new iPad. And I'm like, well, no, I mean, not like real work, right? This was, something for fun, No, this was like Nightwing or something. It wasn't Nightwing. It was something that had Robin in it, I think, or Harley Quinn, or someone. It was a DC book, I think. All of a sudden I wanted to ask 20 questions, because I'm a big techie guy. Like, I was in IT for a long time before I ever started coloring. I used to run a computer repair place. We did business services. Like, I've lost a lot of that knowledge, but I tend to keep up with technology, and I'm usually the one that's waiting on the technology to catch up to what I want, and technology devices usually don't sneak up on me. It's very rare that a device comes out. I'm just like, yeah, I get it. I know what it does. Move on. And I've had people on the channel, ask in comments, hey, can I color on my iPad? I'm like, yeah, you can color, for fun, but, not pro work because, last time I looked at an iPad, which was maybe 2 or 3 years ago, there were apps out there that let you do that, obviously, and I saw digital painters working with it, but there were all these layer limitations, and you could only have 7 layers if you wanted it at 300 DPI, and you couldn't do this and you couldn't do that, and this wasn't possible, and you had to use this workaround, and all these different things. And I was like, and it's an iPad, of course, so I'm thinking it's not going to be very powerful, and it's just not going to handle pro work. I have never been more wrong about anything when it comes to technology. My wife was kind of cracking up over this. She's like, this thing sort of snuck up on you. I'm like, yeah, like that's not normal for me. So anyway, I asked him a million questions. I'm sure bugged the heck out of him trying to figure this out, because I was thinking, yeah, there's no way, right? You don't have this, you don't have that. Turns out, like I said, I just didn't know what in the world I was talking about. So I ended up going to Best Buy and buying an iPad Pro. And I have been absolutely blown away by this device. Now, I realize I am late to the game to this. There's some people that are probably watching this. You're watching this going, yeah, we know, like, you Apple people. I'm kidding. I like Apple too. But, I get home, hook it up, it imports. I got an app called Procreate that imports and exports Photoshop files. Okay, so the audio is going to change a little bit, so I'm decided to just show you guys this instead of telling you. So we're in the app now. This is Procreate, and I'm going to go and we're going to look at the canvas information. Now, this is a page from Postal I'm working on right now. This is a 450 DPI file, so it's a big file, standard comic size. And you can see the maximum number of layers there on the left, 32. I've used 12, and it's got a bunch of other information. It actually tracks how many strokes you make, and it records a time lapse automatically. My point is, the layer limitations are not really a issue for me. So I know a lot of people work with a whole bunch of layers, even more than this, but for me and my purposes, you guys know I don't go through a ton of layers. So even with a 450 DPI file, 32 layers is a lot. The other thing I noticed immediately about this thing is that it's better at doing Wacom's job than Wacom is right now. And what I mean by that is, within the industry, Wacom has definitely had like almost a stranglehold on that technology for a long, long time. And there have been other devices, Surface Pros, some people use those, and there are people that have used, the Apple tablets or whatever. I honestly believe that, like me, there are a lot of professionals right now that are, at least in the comic industry, that are kind of sleeping on Apple, as they say, when it comes to this thing. Because all the questions I had, I was either asking the wrong question or I was confused about something. So, like, for example, another thing that I would notice, and I would just totally write off the iPads, even the iPad Pros. I would look at the specs, and it'd be, A10 I don't even know what A10 processor means. It's some kind of mobile thing. It's the same one that's in the iPhone. So again, I'm just writing it off completely because, I've got a, i7 79 gigahertz, 4,000 gigs of RAM. It's a mobile chip. Who in the world would want to work on that, right? That was my thought process. Now, let me tell you why I'm wrong there, okay? And I'm oversimplifying this almost surely, but the concepts make sense. If you're Adobe and you're making Photoshop, or you're whoever making whatever application, and it needs to work on Windows, think about all of the different ways that computers can be configured, okay? I'm almost positive, if I remember my math from school, when you start multiplying different variables, CPU, RAM, hard drives, SSDs, graphics cards, displays, all the different I/O, all that stuff, drivers, different software versions, all this stuff. You're literally talking about millions and maybe even billions of combinations of configurations that your software has to work with. And I'm sure that means that it can't be 100% optimized for everything, okay? They can get pretty close. I love Photoshop. I still use Photoshop quite a bit. We'll get to that in a second. With apps like Procreate, it's a little bit different. You know, how many iPads are there? How many iOS devices are there? I mean, it's 10, 20. I mean, as far as like, even when you start talking about like current versions of things, we're only talking about a handful. If you get a new iPad Pro, 12.9 I think is one I've got, there's only like one or two configurations, and I think even the differences are storage. So the processor set, RAM set, all that stuff, it is what it is. So a company like Savage that makes Procreate can optimize the out of it, you know, because they've only got it, it needs to work on this one configuration or this handful of configurations basically. And I do realize that, you know, they have to make it work with lesser versions and old iPads and stuff, but we're still talking about much fewer devices. There's no drivers to deal with in the way that we think about drivers on Windows computers anyway. So you can't look like I was at things like, you know, processor speeds and RAM and all this stuff and compare it apples to apples. No pun intended, really. It's not the same thing. You can't look at, you know, 4 gigs or 8 gigs. I don't even know how much RAM is in this iPad, to be honest with you. I think it's 4 gigs, but it might be 8. But it doesn't really matter. That's my point. The applications are designed and optimized to run on that device, period. So the tech specs don't matter. Not that much. So some of you are probably asking, well, how is this different from your Wacom tablet? If you're uncomfortable on it, then wouldn't you be uncomfortable on this new iPad? And the answer is no, because I can go plop down in my recliner. We got new furniture, by the way. I've got a new recliner in here I really like. I can put a pillow in my lap, prop this thing up, and work on it for hours without any pain in my neck, without any pain in my back, you know, without my arm getting tired, prop it up on a pillow. I mean, it's pretty cushy, okay? I don't have to worry about the weight of the device. You know, a MobileStudio Pro 16-inch is, I looked this up earlier also somewhere. So a MobileStudio Pro is 4.5 pounds, okay? That's the equivalent of 3 of these iPad Pros, okay? So I could literally get 3 of these iPads, rubber band them all together, and it would weigh about as much as this thing does, or the Wacom tablet does. It's completely different. You barely feel the thing in your hand. You know, you don't really have to hold it because you can prop it up whatever. You can hold on to it with one hand, put it up on a stand or whatever. It weighs a lot less. I don't have to worry about heat. You know, a Wacom, when you use it for a while, it starts getting warm. At least the MobileStudio Pro, mine got a little warm. Not really hot. There were some got really hot, I heard, but mine really didn't have a big issue with that. But it would get warm, and if you try to set it on like a pillow or something, you might be blocking the fans. All of a sudden it overheats, and you know, that's no good at all. I've heard of people having issues with them overheating and shutting off. Mine never did that, but it stayed well ventilated. So the weight is, it's a big deal, not having to carry around, you know, almost a 5-pound slab. So, but like I mentioned earlier, the drawing and painting experience on this thing, this iPad Pro, is just better than my Wacom. Now, if you look at the numbers technically on paper, I think the Wacom has more levels of pressure sensitivity. I don't think that matters. I don't know where the disconnect is there, because to me the iPad is significantly smoother. Now, part of that, it's smoother in 2 ways. It's smoother in just the refresh rate is higher. It runs at 120 frames per second in some apps, which is insanely fast. So the refresh rate is just super fast. So the strokes go down very, very, very smoothly. And then it's also smoother from a pressure gradient standpoint. And what I mean is, to go from just very lightly pressing to pressing harder and harder and harder, it's a much smoother transition than any of my Wacom stuff. The Intuos, MobileStudio Pro, I actually find myself using less and less like settings adjustments because it's doing what I need it to do without having to change opacities or having to jump up and switch to a different tool because I want a lower opacity or a higher opacity or whatever it is, because there's so much control and it's so precise that I don't find myself jumping around with tools as much. The other thing that I've noticed is I'm not even using my flats layers in some cases, where I would make a selection and then, jump to my paint and start painting. Like, I can just paint with this thing a lot. Now, that's not to say I don't use selections. I definitely do. But it's not required as often because it's so precise. I can be there because there's almost no parallax either. That's the other thing. The distance between the end of the Apple Pencil and the screen is basically nothing. The Wacom claimed that. I didn't. There definitely was some parallax there. So overall, this thing just feels better. It feels a lot better. And I know what some of you guys are thinking, oh no, the channel's going to go all iPad. I'm not saying that at all. There's definitely things that are faster in Photoshop. And so for like setting up your layers, setting your base colors, I've got so many actions and shortcuts and things in Photoshop that what I've been doing is setting up my pages in Photoshop, getting them like I like it, setting my base colors. I might even create some, layers for rendering and different things. The boring dry part of changing the colors of flats and things I'm doing in Photoshop. And then when I want to get away from the desk, I can just import that through Dropbox, what I've been using, to the iPad. And my timing was good on this because, I use a lot of mask when I'm rendering lately. And Procreate 4 just introduced layer mask. So I was just ready to jump for joy when I heard about that. So this has been kind of a long, rambling video. I didn't know where I wanted to start with this video. There was so much I wanted to tell you guys, and I was going to break it up into a bunch of videos, and I decided, let me just dump it all out. And if you're interested, you'll watch, and if you're not, you won't. So that's where I am right now. I'm still using my desktop as much as I used to, but I am finding myself grabbing that iPad a lot more than I did that Wacom tablet. When I'm drawing more, just sketching and painting more than I have in a long, long time because this thing is so comfortable. So like I said, don't worry, the channel's not about to completely convert into, some totally different app, different devices and all that stuff. The channel's still going to do Photoshop tutorials. I probably will start doing some other tutorials and other stuff as I get used to this thing myself, but I kind of want to spend some more time with it before I start doing those sort of things. So I think that's it. And if you're one of those people that have known this, feel free to gloat in the comments if you want. Like, yep, we tried to tell you, whatever. But like I said earlier in the video, the new iPad Pro, I've got the 12.9, the 9-inch, is the best drawing tablet that I've ever used, period, hands down. One last thing, and I promise I'll wrap this up. Because of the nature of being able to just turn it any way you want, you could do that on the Wacom, but again, you've got a 5-pound monolithic slab you're trying to hold up vertically. With the iPad, it's super easy, so you can hold it vertically, and it's about the size of a standard comic book. And so the screen size is actually larger proportionally, I think is the word I'm looking for here. Because think about it, if you've got a comic book page full screen on a 16-inch widescreen monitor, then your comic's going to be here. Okay, well I can take an iPad, turn it sideways, vertically, and it's as tall as the iPad is. So I'm actually able to zoom out, and when the page is completely zoomed out, I'm seeing more of it bigger than I am on the 16-inch Wacom. I hope that makes sense. One question I'm sure some of you guys are asking is about the RGB CMYK situation. So in Procreate, it only works in RGB. So that is one thing that you do have to get back into Photoshop if you want to export it to CMYK. Now there is another app called Affinity Photo that I've recently tried out, and it seems to do the same thing as Photoshop does. You can import PSD files and then export them, flatten them for CMYK for print. I don't trust it yet. I'm in the middle of, issues right now, and I didn't want to switch in the middle of it without making sure the settings were correct. But it did. Affinity Photo did accept the color profiles from Photoshop, which I was a little surprised by. I'll eventually stop being surprised by this thing. So that's one other thing that I didn't expect to be able to do with the iPad that I can. So stay tuned. I've got some big announcements coming really soon regarding my coloring courses, and I can't wait to tell you guys about that. If you've watched through this entire thing, thank you for watching. I know it was long, but like the video, subscribe to the channel if you want to learn more about this stuff, and I will see you guys in the next one. Take care.